Well, thank you, Tom Cooper of the Hamilton Poverty Roundtable, for coming on to the podcast today to talk about the HATS project, which, if you're in the Hamilton area, the GTHA probably has popped up a bit on your radar, especially in light of the national crisis that we're having. Tom, thank you for taking the time to come on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me, Joel.
I'd like to start off just to kind of lay the picture for our listeners. I wonder if you can explain what you saw at the Bennetto Community Centre last week at the meeting that was set up by the City of Hamilton to consult for consultation surrounding the HATS project.
Mm-hmm. It was an opportunity, we thought, for us to engage local community members. This idea around building a small village of tiny homes for people who are unhoused has been around in our community for almost a couple of years now, and we've been trying to work with City Council to identify an appropriate location. We've had some great support from the community. We've been able to raise some funds, and we have a fantastic volunteer team. And so our thought was to try to engage the local community, get some feedback, ask for some guidance, and really talk to them about the project that we envisioned. Just as a little bit of a backstory to it, the HATS project, the Hamilton Alliance for Tiny Shelters, has gone to City Council a few times over the past year or two. We've had a couple of starts and then stops with potential locations. One site we identified fairly early on was the Sir John A. Macdonald High School grounds, which was offered to us by the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. And we had high hopes that that spot might work for our first tiny cabin village. Unfortunately, there was a lot of political pushback at that time, and the local councillor was not at all in favor of it, and so that wasn't able to move forward. Several months later, we were offered another property in Hamilton's East End on Barton Street near Sherman, and it was a small parking lot, and admittedly, it probably wasn't optimal. But we did engage the community on those occasions as well. A couple of community meetings at Tim Hortons Field, which isn't too far away, and we heard loud and clear that the community was concerned and didn't like the spot, and it didn't seem like it would work out. So we walked away from that as well. Now, over the summer, the city had a number of consultations with the public on the encampment protocol and really how the city would move forward in terms of trying to identify appropriate locations for our unhoused neighbors to stay if they couldn't find either a shelter or a home. And out of that process came a recommendation that was put forward by the city for the HATS project, which we've been talking to them about quite a bit, to have a 2-year pilot project on this location on Strawn Street near James Street North. And it's right now there are a lot of encampments in the area, and local residents have been fairly concerned about the impact of those encampments. They've mentioned open drug use and safety concerns, and so we went into a situation maybe that was already a little bit volatile, and I think when we went into Monday's open house with the opportunity, I think, for us to learn from the local neighbors, I think a lot of other people had already become just fed up with the situation they had seen over a number of months, and weren't at all interested in engaging with the HATS program. And unfortunately, that turned to violence in at least 2 instances, and certainly there was a lot of violent confrontations and yelling taking place. And it's not really any way to engage in this type of civic discourse about what we saw as a critical community project. So unfortunately, the event had to be shut down. and that was on the city's recommendation, and we certainly endorsed that, given the high intensity, the high tension in the room, and we thought we'd look for other ways to engage the local community.
Looking at the coverage of that meeting, a lot of criticism has been leveled against the city for the organization of that meeting, and a bit broader on the handling of this of the HATS project. How would you characterize the city's approach to finding a permanent spot for this for the HATS project in Hamilton?
Yeah, we've certainly been frustrated at times. We've developed a fairly good working relationship with senior staffers at the city of Hamilton, as well as councillors and local city councillor Cameron Crutch is very supportive of this project. I think our challenge has been kind of walking into a situation that was already brewing, and concerns from the local population about instances of tent encampments in their neighborhoods. And we thought this program might be an opportunity to provide some stability. What the city recommended in the report that came out in August was really the HATS project would be the only encampment-like program of its kind along that strong linear park area. And so we hoped by having a little bit of oversight, by providing 24-hour staffing and security, it might provide the opportunity for those individuals who are currently living in encampments to find a little bit of stability and safety and improve their health, certainly, as we work with them through a wraparound approach to try to transition them into affordable housing, supportive housing options once those become available. I think the local community is concerned that the encampments won't be moved, and that we'll have both the HATS program and the tent encampments in the same location. That's simply not going to be the case. Our project, I don't think, would work in terms of sitting side by side with tent encampments. It's just not the model that we've been proposing. And we also know there's lots of people out there who are experiencing homelessness for the first time. So there's concerns about poor behavior on the part of individuals who experience homelessness, and sure, that happens. We'd be naive not to acknowledge that. But a lot of people who are experiencing homelessness are just terrified of their situation. Whether it's because of economic evictions like soaring rents or other reasons, people have been displaced from their homes, and they have nowhere else to go because they can't afford the skyrocketing rents we're seeing in the greater Toronto Hamilton area. And so they're looking for options like this to really stabilize their lives, to be able to find some hope that they can get themselves housed down the road.
Right.
So that's really where this project comes from. It's really trying to provide that sense of hope that we can get people back onto their feet into more appropriate housing options. Nobody sees HATS, the Hamilton Alliance for Tiny Shelters, as a permanent solution, and nobody wants to see these tiny cabin villages spring up, across the community and last for years and years and years. We see this as a very short-term option, really, to transition people into more appropriate and supportive housing. And so we need the government to step up at all levels of government, federal, provincial, and municipal too, to really make those investments in affordable housing so that we can get.
On that note, though, do you believe that the city wants this project to succeed? And by that, I mean, I hear a lot of councillors saying, "Oh, we want this to happen," but I don't see any political capital being spent on this. I don't see anybody really kind of going to the barricades to say, this is part of our solution to solving the homelessness in Hamilton. I see there's a lot of criticism towards council is that they're giving a lot of lip service and trying to suck and blow at the same time, if you will, in this. how do you believe that the city actually wants the Hats project to succeed, or is this just a let's just keep kicking the can down the road?
Yeah, it's a good question. I have to believe that those at the city who've been working with us do want this to succeed. But it's a hugely challenging situation, right? Nobody wants this type of program in their neighborhood, and it becomes very challenging around location. We've identified a couple of other sites in the city of Hamilton in the past, and they haven't worked out for various reasons. But I do believe there's good faith at the city, both from senior staff who've been working with us, as well as particularly the local councillor who we've been working with, but other councillors as well. So I think they do want to see this succeed, but again, it's just a pilot project, and they want to test out the idea. We know it's worked well in some other places, particularly in Waterloo region, where the region of Waterloo just invested around $5 million into this sort of program, and now they have 50 tiny cabins set up. City of Kingston has put some money behind a similar project as well, and I visited that about 6 months ago, and it's working really well. The city donated a municipally owned facility for common washroom and kitchen facilities and laundry, and it's working well. It's located down by Kingston's waterfront, and there's about 10 or 12 cabins set up, accessible for those who need it. And I had the chance to talk to some of the residents there, and they said the program has really turned their lives around, particularly for individuals who spent years out on the street. This type of situation for people who, for various reasons, don't want to go to the shelter system because of fear or because of concerns about health or safety, have an option in a program like this. For individuals who are in a couple who don't want to break up and go to separate shelters because that's usually not an option, here's a program that could work for them. Even individuals with who've been evicted, who have a pet, and we've heard these stories. Individuals, right. A woman was evicted. She didn't want to give up her cat, so she took her cat with her to live on in a tent encampment on the side of Hamilton's escarpment. And these are the stories that are in our community, and we can find creative solutions. And here's one. And I do believe the city council will get behind it and see the value in this sort of idea.
Well, I'm glad that you think that council is on board with this, because it seems to me that no matter what site that is proposed for this, in the end, you always come up against opposition from residents. I mean, most recently, the biggest, I think, opposition was Leuna, voicing their opposition to a proposed site, which was opposite of their headquarters or close to one of their properties. What do you take away from this fact? Are Hamiltonians opposed to this idea, or sorry, are they still open to the project? And if they are not open to it, then how do you hope to proceed on this?
Yeah, these are tough questions, and we are still in our due diligence phase, really, Joel. When the city offered us the Strawn linear park location, we said, we'd have to take a look at it over the month of September, look at it from an infrastructure perspective, because we need full access washroom facilities there, which don't currently exist. So we'd have to bring in either a trailer or some sort of modular unit and hook it up to the wastewater system. We'd have to hook up hydro and all that. That's an extraordinary amount of money. So we need both from an infrastructure or budget perspective, we have to look at that. We also have to look at it from a safety perspective, both for the tiny cabin village residents as well as for others in the community. In terms of Leuna, we've had some good conversations with them, and I understand their position. Their Leuna station is really a beacon of a Hamilton Hamilton landmark, really, that gets a lot of attention, gets a lot of visitors each year for various conventions and weddings and banquets and that sort of thing. And they're concerned about individuals who are currently homeless, creating a nuisance on that property. And we've told them we think our project could stabilize the local neighborhood by ensuring that individuals would be in a setting that had some oversight, that had some security, and people would have washroom facilities, which is really critical. And if people are in tent encampments and there's no place to go to the washroom, they're gonna use places close by, and that's what Leon has been experiencing. So I do appreciate their concerns, but I think as a community we can come together and find mutually acceptable solutions, come to compromises. We're not going to get everything we want, neither HATS nor the local community maybe, but I think we could come and find some common ground.
I think the reason why this is getting such a high profile is because nationally we are in the midst of a national housing crisis that's going on, and I kind of want to get your. I mean, I see the inherent value of this project, and it's reassuring that so many other municipalities in Ontario are kind of taking this up. I want to get your perspective on how do you see the HAS project fitting into this national housing crisis narrative? I mean, right now the pressure is on, we need to build affordable housing. And to the layman, it's like, well, okay, I need to go get a mortgage, or I need to afford rent. And here you are giving money, you're giving a free house to these people who in their mind, they figure they may not deserve it, or just the fact of I'm hurting, I need to pay rent, I need to pay my mortgage, and they're getting a free house. How do you see the HAS project fitting into this overall crisis that we're experiencing in Canada?
Yeah, I think we see it very much in parallel to the traditional shelter system, but really being able to acknowledge that not everybody will fit in to the shelter system for various reasons. And I mentioned some of those already. I think our vision for this project is that HATS Village members will have a stake in their community's future. And one of the things we're hoping, and we're not making this mandatory at all, but a lot of people who are currently experiencing homelessness are on provincial social assistance programs, either Ontario Works or ODSP, for whatever the reason may be. Directing their portion of their shelter allowance to this project is something we've talked about. So it wouldn't necessarily be a free ride necessarily, but it would be contributing to the betterment of the tiny village community and helping with the operations on that level. We'd also want to ensure that anybody who came to the tiny village community or the tiny cabin community wanted to contribute and take part in cleanup and be part of certainly improving skills development if that was appropriate for them, taking part in other programs, whether addiction counseling or other things. So we really do see this as an opportunity for healing people who've been on the street for a long time and maybe under tremendous trauma. And so I think the general population understands that and values the opportunity to see this program succeed.
No, this may have been should have been one of my first questions, but I may have dropped the ball on this. But John, people might not know the difference between what this tiny shelter project is and what the mission or shelter system would be. Can you maybe just elaborate on just how this isn't just a fancy mission, a shelter system or a mission system that you have people just going in for a day to get a bed and dealing with that. Can you maybe just elaborate on just what the HATS system is different than previous homelessness solutions?
Yeah, this this project, this proposal really offers more autonomy, I think, for the individual. And so they'd be getting their own cabin, their own key, lockable space, so that they can have some privacy, which often isn't available at the traditional shelter system. And we know the shelters do an amazing job, and they have a great group of staff and volunteers helping individuals who often have nowhere to turn. But there are challenges with that system too. And we think providing this alternative for those who aren't in the shelter system. So it would be for people who are currently in tent encampments and maybe in dangerous situations, because we've gone out and talked to a lot of people who are currently unhoused about their situation, whether they think they would fit into this sort of project, and almost 100% said yes. They'd love the opportunity to have a lockable space where they could keep themselves and their belongings and stay warm. And so these tiny shelters would have their own heating system. They'd have a little microwave, so people could warm food, a small fridge, and an opportunity to store a couple of belongings. But we'd want to be very careful about not endorsing the idea of hoarding, which often comes with some individuals experiencing homelessness with high acuity. So we'd be very careful with that. The shelter system, on the other hand, is more of a community space where people may stay on mats in a common room, and there can sometimes be concerns about individual safety or health in those situations, and so it's just really a different alternative. Both are essential, but we think ours might be a good fit for those who otherwise can't fit into the shelter system for various reasons.
There's something you just mentioned that it sparked my head. We're dealing with a national housing crisis, and the issue of affordable housing for people of various economic backgrounds, not just in Hamilton but across the country. And it struck me that what we're really dealing with is the loss of autonomy over your person. And I'll expand on that thought. Is that the more secure you are in your financial situation, the more autonomy you have over your daily decisions in your life. You can choose where to eat, what to eat, working from home, etc. You just have more control of your life. And as you lose, and a lot of it is tied to our homes. You have a safe, secure home. You have that much more autonomy over how to live your life. When you lose your home, or if you're on that precariousness of losing your home, you're at risk of losing your rent, your apartment, whatever. That ends up becoming like I'm gonna this might be a euphemism, but I really do think it's a pit. You end up falling into it because it's hard to gain back that autonomy if you don't have things like a mailing address, a simple mailing address to collect, to correspond with people, or a phone, be able to even have like a basic landline, something a way that people can touch base with you. And I see this is a better safety net, if you will, than the mission system or the shelter system, in my opinion, just because it does give that shred of autonomy over your life that you can use that seed to rebuild your life.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I think that's something we're hoping to see as well. And from the research we've done into other tiny cabin communities across Canada and in the US, that seems to be working. And there seems to be a much higher success rate for moving people into permanent forms of housing from this type of program as opposed to the shelter system on its own. But you're absolutely right, Joel, about the idea that poverty is about lack of choice in your life. And we've argued for a long time, particularly when looking at Ontario's woefully inadequate social assistance rates, that keeping people in deep poverty is It's certainly heart-wrenching and soul-destroying, but it is taking away that autonomy. And we feel that certainly providing a stable place to call home, even if it's for several months until something more permanent comes along, is really a critical part of that healing process. When we were testing out the idea of basic income here in Hamilton a few years ago, we found that almost to a person, people who were receiving basic income were using that financial support for things to improve their lives, eating healthier. They were buying clothing. They were re-engaging in the community. Their physical and mental health improved, and we think the same outcome will result from this sort of program, because it is offering stability and that autonomy that you talk about.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you brought up the basic income idea, because we did a couple episodes on that way back when we first started, and just how simple and transformative it was to people. The idea of just, we're hearing all about your freedom in the press these days. The importance of having that personal freedom, and I kept thinking to myself, what more freedom is it just say, well, here's a check to cover your basic needs, go do with it what you will, and say, I'm going to trust you that you know what's best for you. If you need to pay rent this week or this month, this is what's going to help you out. If you need to go buy groceries, this is what's going to help you out best. And I think that this project kind of parallels that, to say, we're just going to give you a safe, secure home, and you can get on your feet, and then you figure out what's best. If you need to go get a better education, you need to go complete a college course, or if you need to, you just need a stable address to go apply to a job, or a place to go wash up, so you don't come in wearing the same clothing, or you look disheveled when you walk into a job interview. If that's what it takes to get you back on your feet, why don't we give it to people? And I'm rambling here, and it's a podcast, I'm allowed to do that. But it kind of comes down to a fundamental rethinking of this issue. And I think we're at a point in our society where we can honestly ask ourselves these questions: is that the previous ways, like the mission, I'm thinking like the mission and the shelter system and Ontario Works and these things, I find they're geared with this underlying premise of, you did this to yourself, and we can't trust you anymore. You're not trustworthy. You're a bad person, and we're doing this because we have pity on you, not because it's a failure of failure of the system, or it's a run of bad luck, or any number of countless reasons why your circumstances have gone down or taken a downhill turn. Like, is it just a matter of, like, we just got to rethink how that that the lower rungs of society are not there because they choose to be there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a matter of putting faith in people again. And I think we've lost that, particularly over the last few years. We need to regain our common shared sense of humanity. And we've been living in a antiquated social assistance system that's broken, keeps individuals on Ontario Works earning $733 a month, which comes nowhere close to meeting cost of rent in any of our communities, let alone being able to purchase nutritious food, stay clothed, buy hygiene products, be able to get around the community. So when we tested the idea of basic income here in Hamilton, as well as in Thunder Bay and in Lindsay, we really did find those outcomes were transformational, as you said, Joel. Yeah, even things you wouldn't expect. We worked with McMaster University after the pilot was canceled to survey more than 200 basic income pilot participants here in Hamilton. And one of the unusual things they found was that people were smoking less when they were on basic income. And you might think, well, you have more money, why wouldn't you smoke more, but that wasn't the case. And I really do think it was about that piece of autonomy. People felt control over their lives again, and so maybe they didn't feel they needed to engage in unhealthy practices because they had other ways, had more agency over their lives.
Can I give you my 2 cents and unscientific opinion on why that was the case?
Yeah.
You smoke a lot of times because you're bored and you have nothing else to do. If you have capital in your pocket and you say, well, I can go back to school and I have to go to the library, or I have job interviews I need to get around to, you don't have time to say, well, I'm just going to pull out and smoke because I got nothing to do. Right. If you busy hand, or was it idle hands or the work of the devil?
Good point.
That kind of mentality. If you give, and I always view that, like, bring it back to the hats and an income, basic income. It's more of an investment in people to say, if we keep hearing people are our number one resource in our economy. So why wouldn't we put capital behind that resource and just say, get out of the way, right?
Exactly.
Go see what you're going to do. We had on, we've had on people before, and it's just talked about how they use it to start businesses and what I thought, if you could combine that with a hats project, so to catch those people who are dangling on the last rung of society, so to speak, instead of just saying, well, we're going to punish you in a shelter system. And I say this because my wife works in the social work world, and she tells me about the shelter system and how it's just so unsafe and it's so sketchy and it's just so unstable. It's not a means to get somebody back on their feet and say, okay, start climbing up that social ladder again. The success stories that we hear are exceptions to the rule. They're not proof that the system is working. They're people who have defied the system. And so I said, well, I'm rambling, so I'm gonna skip to my last question here that I've written down. And now, you mentioned before about Waterloo and Kingston, as well as cities that have done similar projects to the hats system. We've had on the podcast city councilors from Mississauga who are talking about implementing a similar system there. What, bit of Hamilton pride here. What would it say about Hamilton should this project fail? Should they let this project just fall by the wayside because of inaction, or just general malaise from the public?
Yeah, and I don't necessarily think it's inaction or malaise. I think there's a fair bit of fear and a unknown factor as well as to what this project means for local neighborhoods. And we've had pushback everywhere we've tried to go, given that we've done community consultations and heard very loud and clear that a lot of individuals don't want it in their neighborhood, and that's understandable. There's concern there, but I think we can overcome those by having civil conversation about what this project is all about, the safeguards that are in place for both the tiny cabin residents as well as for the local neighborhood, and talking about an exit strategy as well. Again, nobody wants to see this 5 or 7 or 10 years down the road. We'd love to be able to have this set up for 2 or 3 years, be able to transition individuals into more appropriate supportive housing, and then shut it down, and we could use the shed in somebody's garden or something after that. But it's incumbent on massive investments in affordable housing and support services, and it's not just the hard infrastructure piece of affordable housing. We also need those support services to help people stay in those affordable units, because that's often been the big challenge, and that's really where, it's sad to say, the provincial government has really fallen down in terms of funding and support, and that's where we need them to really pick up the ball and engage communities again in those soft services that do keep people housed and keep them in a situation that improves their health, quite frankly. because and you said this before, it's an investment in all of our futures. It's helping those individuals, but as taxpayers, it's also helping us to see projects like this succeed, because we know there's far fewer costs to the healthcare system. There's far fewer costs to the justice system in terms of lost earning potential. So I think this project is a win-win, but we just have to get over this hump of recognizing that we don't want it in our neighborhood, and having some uncomfortable, tough conversation, but recognizing that maybe it's not going to be quite as concerning as you think it might be.
A thought that would pop in my head is, if you find a spot for it, if the city would promise that, right now, who knows how long it's going to, but foreseeably for the next 2 years, the federal government's going to try and build affordable housing, and they're going to try and push this forward, and they're going to put all these conditions on the municipalities across Canada to change zoning bylaws and whatnot to permit this more affordable housing, presumably to be built in the places that we need it. I would just put it out there. It'd be if the Hamilton said, okay, we put a site there. The Hats project is temporary, but as you say, in 2 or 3 years, we will greenlight affordable apartment rentals to be built there. And that think of it more as a affordable housing seeding project, as opposed to a fancy tent encampment, I guess, is kind of how the public is viewing this at the moment.
Yeah, and I think that would be optimal, really, is if we could transition individuals from tiny cabins into those sort of supportive housing units. And we've had some great conversations locally with organizations like Indwell, which is doing an amazing job building supportive housing for vulnerable people in Hamilton and really right across Southern Ontario. So we'll continue to have those conversations and with City Housing Hamilton and others. But again, I think short term, we have to recognize that there are hundreds of people on the streets right now. Winter is coming. We need some protection for them. We need some safety for them, some stability for them, and so we see this as a short-term opportunity to keep people alive, quite frankly.
And I know people are adamant they don't want to see tent encampments in their city, which I totally agree with. I do think tent encampments are inherently dangerous and unsafe for not just Hamiltonians, but I think also, well, Hamiltonians are part of the residents, but like the residents of the tent encampments, it's unsafe for them. It's unsafe for park patrons or neighborhood patrons, that sort of thing. But I don't see them going away. I think that this is a project that could be a much safer alternative. Otherwise, the alternative, I think, is the state that we're going in right now is bigger tent encampments in the parks and roadways of Hamilton. And not just Hamilton. I think the entire GTA is facing this problem.
Exactly.
So we need new solutions to these problems. I see we're coming up on our time, and I don't want to take too much of more of your time, Tom. I know you're a busy man. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today. I suspect we'll be hearing more about the Hats project around in the future.
Thank you, Joel. It's been great being on.